The cold metal walls of the prison ship hummed with a low vibration that never stopped. Tae-min sat cross-legged on the dirty floor of his cell, breathing slowly through his nose. Around him, other prisoners paced like caged animals or lay curled, in corners, but he remained still as a mountain. 3 months had passed since the aliens came to Earth. 3 months since the ships appeared in the sky like dark clouds blocking out the sun. The humans called them the Galactic Dominion, though Tae-min doubted that was what they called themselves. Names did not matter much when your world was being conquered. The ship carried 200 prisoners from dozens of different worlds. Most looked nothing like humans. Some were tall as trees with skin like tree bark. Others were small and moved on 6 legs like insects. A few glowed with their own light, floating instead of walking. But they all shared the same look in their eyes, the hollow stare of the defeated. Tae-min closed his eyes and remembered the monastery where he had lived for 15 years. High in the mountains of China, far from the cities where the aliens first landed, Master Li had taught him that peace could be found even in the darkest times. That strength came not from fighting the storm, but from being the calm center around which it turned. You meditate too much, human. The voice came from the cell next to his. Tae-min opened his eyes and saw a creature that looked like a giant lizard standing on 2 legs. Its scales were dark green and its teeth were sharp as knives. The other, prisoners called his kind saurians. There is no such thing as too much meditation, Tae-min replied quietly. The saurian laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. Meditation will not save you from what is coming. I am Gorth. I have killed 47 beings with my bare claws. What have you killed, little human? Tae-min looked at the creature with calm eyes. I have killed no one. This made Gorth laugh, even harder. Then you will die quickly when we reach the arena. The arena. Every prisoner knew about it, though none spoke of it openly. Whispers in the dark said it was a place where beings fought for the entertainment of the Dominion's wealthy, where death was turned into a game for creatures who had never known real struggle. Heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. The prisoners fell silent as a tall figure approached. It wore the black uniform of the Dominion guards and had skin like polished stone. 4 arms hung at its sides, each ending in hands with too many fingers. Its face had no nose, just holes where a nose should be, and its eyes were pure white without any pupil. Attention, meat, the guard said in a voice that sounded like metal, scraping metal. I am Warden Vextal. Tomorrow we reach Nexus Prime. Some of you will have the honor of competing in the grand arena. The creature that glowed with soft blue light near the back of the corridor spoke up. What kind of competition? Vextal turned its horrible white eyes toward the speaker. The kind where winners go free and losers become fertilizer for the arena. Gardens. The crowd loves fresh blood and the Dominion loves happy crowds. A heavy silence fell over the prisoners. Tae-min felt his heart beat a little faster, but he kept his breathing steady. Fear was natural, Master Li had taught him. The mistake was in trying to fight it or letting it control you. Fear was just another storm to find the center of. Who chooses the competitors? Asked a small creature that looked like it was made of living crystal. Volunteers go first, Vextal said with what might have been a smile if its face could make such expressions. After that we choose the most interesting specimens. The crowd pays well for variety. Gorth stepped forward, his claws scraping against the metal bars of his cell. I volunteer. Of course you do, lizard, Vextal said. Your kind always thinks with their claws instead of their brains. Anyone else brave enough to step forward? More prisoners volunteered. The insect-like creatures, several of the tree-bark beings, even some of the glowing ones. They spoke of honor and freedom, but Tae-min could hear the fear underneath their brave words. What about you, human? Vextal pointed one of its 4 arms at Tae-min. Your species put up quite a fight before we took your world. Surely you want a chance at revenge. Tae-min stood slowly, his movement smooth as flowing water. Every eye in the corridor turned to him. He was smaller than almost every other prisoner, but he held himself with a quiet dignity that made him seem taller than he was. I volunteer, he said simply. The sound that came from the other prisoners was like wind through leaves. a mixture of surprise, respect, and pity. Gorth stared at him with something that might have been confusion. "You are very small for a warrior," Vextall observed. "Size is not the measure of strength," Taemin replied. "We shall see about that." The warden made a note on a device that appeared in one of its hands. "The galaxy will enjoy watching you die, human. Your kind has caused us considerable trouble. Breaking you publicly will send a message to any who still resist." After Vextall left, the other prisoners looked at Taemin with new interest. Some with respect, others with the look people give to someone who has just signed their own death sentence. "Why did you volunteer?" asked the crystal being. "You could have hidden. Let them choose others." Taemin sat back down and resumed his meditation pose. Running from fate only makes the journey longer. Better to meet it with dignity. "Dignity will not save you from Quartzling battle claws," the crystal being said. "I am made of living mineral. My punches can shatter stone. What can flesh do against that?" "We will find out soon enough," Taemin said, closing his eyes again. But inside his mind, he was not thinking about dying. He was remembering Master Li's final lesson, given on the day the aliens came to their mountain. The old man had looked into Taemin's eyes and spoken words that seemed impossible at the time. "You will travel far from this place, my student. You will face enemies unlike any we have trained against. Remember that water defeats stone not through force but through patience. Remember that the strongest tree is the one that bends in the storm. And remember that sometimes one person in the right place at the right time can change the fate of worlds." The ship hummed on through space, carrying its cargo of the condemned toward their destiny. In his cell, Taemin breathed slowly and felt his heartbeat grow calm. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. Tonight he would prepare his mind and spirit for the storm ahead. Around him, the other prisoners prepared for battle in their own ways. Gorth sharpened his claws on the metal walls. The crystal beings hardened their mineral skin until it rang like bells when struck. The glowing ones practiced focusing their inner light into weapons. But Taemin simply sat in stillness, finding the quiet center that his master had taught him was the source of all true strength. He did not know that in making this choice, he was about to change not just his own fate, but the fate of every enslaved world in the galaxy. The Dominion had ruled through fear and superior technology for 1,000 years. They had never encountered anything like what was coming for them. They had never met a Shaolin monk who understood that the greatest victories were won not through violence, but through showing others a different way to live. The prison ship flew on through the darkness, carrying both doom and hope toward the same destination. The arena was bigger than anything Taemin had ever seen. It stretched out like a giant bowl carved from black stone, with seats rising up and up until they disappeared into shadows. Millions of alien beings filled those seats, their voices creating a sound like thunder that never stopped. In the center of the arena was a flat circle of sand the color of dried blood. That was where the fighting happened. That was where beings came to die for the entertainment of creatures who had never known real hardship. Taemin stood in a holding cell beneath the arena floor, listening to the crowd above. Through the bars, he could see other fighters preparing. Some prayed to gods he had never heard of. Others sharpened weapons or tested their strength against the walls. A few just sat in corners, staring at nothing. "Look at the small human," said a voice like breaking glass. Taemin turned to see one of the crystal beings from the ship. Its body caught the dim light and threw it back in rainbow colors. "Still meditating while death waits above." "Death waits for all of us," Taemin replied calmly. "Meditation helps me remember that this moment is the only one that matters." The crystal being laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Your moment will be very short, soft flesh." Heavy doors slid open with a grinding sound. Warden Vextall stepped through, followed by guards carrying energy weapons. Behind them came another alien that Taemin had not seen before. This one was huge, with gray skin covered in scars and tentacles where its arms should be. When it spoke, its voice boomed like drums. "I am Zephyros, voice of the arena," it announced. "Today, 8 fighters will enter the circle. Only one will leave. The rules are simple. Fight until you cannot fight anymore. The crowd decides if you live or die. Zephyros pointed at each fighter with one of its tentacles. Gorth of the Saurian Empire, Silkar the Venomak Poison Warrior, Thane of the Quartzling Crystal Clans, Vex the Scion Mindbender, Krath the Dreadnought Armor-Bearer, Zim the Luminant Lightwalker, Mor the Void Stalker, and the human called Taemin. Each name brought cheers or boos from the crowd above. When Zephyros said Taemin's name, the sound that came down was laughter. Long, loud laughter that seemed to shake the walls. The betting odds stand at 10,000 to 1 against the human, Zephyros continued. The crowd finds it amusing that such a small creature dares to face warriors from across the galaxy. Gorth moved closer to Taemin, his claws clicking on the stone floor. I told you meditation would not save you, human. When we enter that circle, I will crush your bones to powder. Taemin looked up at the giant lizard creature without fear. We shall see what happens when the time comes. The other fighters gathered around, studying their opponents. Silkar the Venomak had green skin that seemed to move on its own, and Taemin could smell something sharp and bitter in the air around him, poison. Thane looked like a statue made of purple crystal, beautiful but hard as diamond. Vex had large black eyes that seemed to stare right through him, and Taemin felt a strange pressure against his mind. Krath wore armor that covered every part of his body. Only his eyes showed through the metal, glowing red like coals. Zim appeared, to be made of pure light, shifting and changing colors like a living rainbow. Mor was the strangest of all. Sometimes he was there, sometimes he seemed to fade away like smoke. Warriors, prepare yourselves, Zephyros announced. The crowd grows restless. The floor beneath their feet began to rise. They were standing on a platform that lifted them up toward the arena floor. Light poured down from above, bright after the darkness of the cells. The sound of the crowd grew louder and louder until it felt like standing inside a waterfall. Taemin squinted against the brightness and saw the arena in all its terrible glory. The blood-red sand stretched out in a perfect circle. Around the edges, energy barriers hummed with deadly power. There would be no escape once the fighting began. Above, row after row of alien faces looked down at them with hunger and excitement. Citizens of the Dominion, Zephyros's voice boomed across the arena. Today we offer you blood and glory. 8 warriors from across the galaxy will fight for your pleasure. Place your bets and prepare for carnage. The platform locked into place level with the arena floor. The fighters stepped onto the sand, spreading out in a rough circle. Taemin felt the grains beneath his feet and took a deep breath. The air smelled of fear and old blood. Let the games begin, Zephyros roared. For a moment, nobody moved. The fighters watched each other, looking for weakness or opportunity. Then Gorth let out a roar that shook the arena and charged straight at Taemin. The Saurian was fast for his size, crossing the sand in seconds with his claws extended. The crowd cheered, expecting to see the human torn apart in the first moments of the fight. But Taemin was not where Gorth expected him to be. As the giant lizard lunged forward, Taemin stepped to one side like water flowing around a rock. He placed one hand on Gorth's arm and another on his hip, using the Saurian's own momentum against him. Gorth flew through the air and crashed into Thane, the crystal warrior, both of them going down in a tangle of claws and sharp edges. The crowd fell silent for the first time since Taemin had entered the arena. But the silence did not last long. Silkar spat a stream of poison at Taemin's face. The human dropped low and rolled, feeling the deadly liquid pass over his head. As he came up from the roll, Vex the Scion tried to crush his mind with mental force. Taemin had trained for years to empty his thoughts during meditation. The psychic attack found nothing to grip and slid away like rain off a roof. Before Vex could try again, Taemin was moving. He flowed between his opponents like smoke, never staying in one place long enough for them to pin him down. When Krath swung his armored fist, Taemin caught the arm and twisted, using a pressure point technique that sent the warrior crashing to his knees despite his metal shell. Mor tried to fade away and attack from behind, but Taemin's years of meditation had sharpened his senses beyond what most beings thought possible. He could feel the Void Stalker's presence even when invisible, and struck out with a precise blow that sent Mor tumbling across the sand. Zim rushed forward as a being of pure light, but light had no weight behind it. Taemin simply stepped aside and let the luminant pass, then struck at the energy core that held his opponent's form together. Zim's light scattered like sparks from a fire. In less than 5 minutes, 7 warriors lay unconscious or groaning in the sand around the small human who stood breathing easily in the center of the arena. The crowd sat in absolute silence, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. High above in the luxury boxes, beings who had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years looked down at the human with something they had not felt in centuries: uncertainty. The small creature from the conquered world had just done something impossible, and none of them could explain how. Taemin bowed respectfully to his fallen opponents, then turned to face the crowd. His voice carried clearly across the silent arena. "I harbor no hatred for these warriors. They fought with honor. I ask that they be treated with the respect due to brave beings." Zephyros stared down at him with all 8 of his eyes wide. "The human wins." The crowd exploded into sound again, but this time it was not laughter. This time it was something much more dangerous: curiosity. News of the human's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had never heard of Earth watched recordings of the fight. They saw a small creature move like flowing water between opponents who should have crushed him easily. They saw impossible techniques that turned strength against itself. In the luxury towers that surrounded the arena, the wealthy and powerful of the Dominion held emergency meetings. These beings had conquered worlds and enslaved entire species. They understood power, but what they had witnessed made no sense to them. Arena Master Colthax paced in his private chamber high above the fighting grounds. His species had ruled the arena for 500 years, and nothing like this had ever happened before. He was tall and thin, with skin like black metal and eyes that glowed red in the darkness. When he was angry, which was most of the time, small lightning bolts danced between his fingers. "Explain to me," he said to Warden Vextal, "how a human no bigger than my arm defeated 7 trained killers." Vextal stood perfectly still, knowing that any sign of weakness would mean death. "The human moves strangely, not like other fighters. He seems to know where attacks will come before they happen." "Magic," Colthax spat, and real lightning crackled from his hands. "There is no such thing. Everything can be explained by science or superior breeding. This human has some trick we do not understand yet." "What are your orders, Master?" Vextal asked. Colthax turned to stare out at the arena where maintenance crews were preparing for the next day's matches. "Double the guards around the human. Triple them. I want to know everything about his species and their fighting methods, and bring me the Wraith Hunters." Even Vextal, who feared nothing in the known galaxy, took a step backward. "Master, the Wraith Hunters have not been released in 50 years. They are what we need," Colthax finished. "Beings who can move through walls and strike from nowhere. If this human has superior reflexes, we will test them against opponents he cannot see or predict." Far below in the holding cells, Taemin sat in meditation as he had every night since arriving. But tonight was different. Other prisoners who had ignored him before now pressed against their cell bars to watch him. Some whispered questions, others just stared. "How did you do it?" The voice belonged to Silkar, the Venomac poison warrior. His green skin was paler now, and bandages covered the places where Taemin's pressure point strikes had damaged his poison glands. "I have killed beings 3 times your size. My venom can melt through metal. Yet you defeated me without even breathing hard." Taemin opened his eyes but did not move from his sitting position. "I used your own strength against you, like redirecting a river instead of trying to stop it." "Impossible," said Thane from the Crystal Warrior's cell. His purple body still showed cracks where Gorth had crashed into him. "Strength is strength. Force is force. You cannot make them flow backward." "Watch," Taemin said simply. He stood and moved to the center of his small cell. With slow, graceful movements, he began to demonstrate the basic forms of Tai Chi. His arms moved like branches swaying in a gentle wind. His feet shifted position with perfect balance. "This is called yielding to overcome," he explained as he moved. "When a great force pushes against me, I do not push back. I step aside and guide the force where I want it to go. The harder my opponent tries to hit me, the more power I can use against them. The prisoners watched in fascination as Taemin showed them movements that looked like a slow dance, but contained the secrets of defeating much stronger opponents. Even the guards stopped their patrol to stare. "Your people all know this fighting method?" asked a creature that looked like a walking tree. Its bark-like skin creaked when it spoke. "Some do," Taemin replied. "My teachers spent their whole lives learning these techniques. They understood that true strength comes from harmony between body, mind, and spirit, not from size or weapons." "Teach us," Silkar said suddenly. "If we are to fight in this arena, we should learn what you know." Other voices joined in, asking the same thing. For the first time since being captured, these beings from different worlds found something that united them: the desire to understand how a small human had made their greatest warriors look like children. Taemin considered their request. Master Li had taught him that knowledge shared was knowledge multiplied. "I will teach what I can. But remember, these techniques took me 15 years to learn properly. You cannot master them in a few days." He began with the most basic principle: breathing. "Everything starts with the breath," he said. "Your breath connects your mind to your body. Control your breathing, and you can control your fear, your anger, your pain." As the prisoners practiced breathing exercises, none of them noticed the shadows moving in the corners of the cell block. The Wraith Hunters had arrived. These beings were unlike anything else in the galaxy. Born in the spaces between dimensions, they could exist in the physical world, or fade into nothingness as they chose. They had no permanent form, appearing sometimes as wisps of smoke, sometimes as vaguely humanoid shapes made of shadow. 3 of them drifted through the walls of the prison like ghosts. Their mission was simple: kill the human before he could fight again. Make it look like an accident or an attack by another prisoner. The Dominion needed to end this strange threat before it inspired others to resist. But as they approached Taemin's cell, something unexpected happened. The human stopped his teaching and turned to look directly at the corner where the first Wraith Hunter was materializing. "I know you are there," Taemin said quietly. The other prisoners looked around in confusion, seeing nothing. But Taemin's years of meditation had opened senses that most beings never developed. He could feel the disturbance in the air, the slight change in temperature, the way reality bent around beings that existed in multiple dimensions at once. The first Wraith Hunter solidified into a form like a man made of black smoke. In its hands appeared weapons that seemed to be made of crystallized darkness. The other 2 flanked it, becoming visible as they prepared to attack. "Assassins," Silkar hissed, recognizing the creatures from stories told in the darkest corners of the galaxy. The first Wraith Hunter struck with impossible speed, its shadow blade aimed at Taemin's heart. But the human was no longer where the blade expected to find him. He had moved at the exact moment the assassin committed to its attack, flowing to one side like water. As the Wraith Hunter's momentum carried it forward, Taemin's hand shot out and struck it at a point where its shadow form met the physical world. The creature let out a sound like screaming wind and collapsed, its form scattering like smoke in a strong breeze. The second assassin tried to fade back into the between spaces, but Taemin had already sensed its movement. He struck out at empty air, and suddenly the Wraith Hunter was solid again, gasping and clutching at its chest where the human's attack had somehow reached it, even in its non-physical state. The third assassin hesitated, something its kind had never done before. In that moment of uncertainty, Taemin moved. 3 precise strikes, each aimed at pressure points that existed in all living beings regardless of their dimension of origin. The last Wraith Hunter crumpled to the floor of the cell block. The other prisoners stared in amazement. Even the guards were speechless. Taemin had just defeated beings that most of the galaxy considered myths, creatures that could kill anyone, anywhere without being seen or stopped. "How?" whispered Thane. "They were not fully in our reality. How could you touch them?" Taemin knelt beside the fallen assassins, checking to make sure they were only unconscious, not dead. All beings exist in harmony with the universe, even those who move between dimensions. If you can sense that harmony, you can affect it. High above, Arena Master Colthax watched the security recordings with growing rage and fear. His most deadly assassins had been defeated as easily as common street fighters. Lightning danced around his entire body now, scorching the walls of his chamber. "Bring me the Titan soldiers," he ordered. "All of them, and prepare the championship gauntlet. If this human wants to fight, we will give him more opponents than any being has ever faced." But even as he gave these orders, Colthax felt something he had not experienced in centuries of ruling through fear and violence. For the first time in his long life, he was beginning to doubt that he could win. In his cell, Taemin returned to his meditation, but now he was not alone. Around him, prisoners from a dozen worlds sat quietly, trying to learn the breathing techniques he had shown them. They did not yet understand what they were part of, but something was beginning to change in the depths of the arena. The seed of rebellion had been planted, and it was starting to grow. The championship gauntlet was the most feared challenge in the known galaxy. It was a death trap that had claimed thousands of lives over the centuries. No warrior had ever survived past the fifth wave. The arena masters had designed it to be absolutely impossible to complete. 10 waves of the deadliest creatures in space, with no rest between battles and no way to escape. Arena Master Colthax sat in his control tower, watching the preparations below. His red eyes glowed brighter than usual as he thought about what was coming. This human had already done the impossible twice. But the gauntlet was different. It was not just about fighting. It was about enduring until your body and spirit broke completely. "The human still refuses all weapons and armor," Warden Vextall reported. "He says his training is all he needs." Colthax made a sound like grinding metal. "Good. When he dies screaming, the galaxy will see what happens to those who defy the Dominion. Begin the ceremony." The arena had never been more crowded. Beings from every corner of space had come to witness this event. The human's victories had become legend across 1,000 worlds. Some came hoping to see him succeed. Others wanted to watch him fail. All of them sensed that something important was about to happen. Taemin walked onto the red sand as massive energy barriers rose around him like prison walls. The circle was 200 feet across, large enough to give him room to move, but small enough that there would be no place to hide. Above him, millions of alien voices created a sound like thunder that never stopped. But in his mind, there was perfect silence. He had spent the entire night in the deepest meditation of his life. Master Li had taught him that the greatest battles were won before they began in the quiet spaces where fear and doubt lived. If he could find peace there, he could find it anywhere. "Citizens of the Dominion," Zephyros announced, his voice shaking the arena walls. "Today we present the ultimate test of combat skill. The championship gauntlet has claimed over 3,000 lives. No being has ever survived all 10 waves. What you're about to witness is not a contest. It is an execution." The sand beneath Taemin's feet began to change. In some places it turned to burning coals that glowed red hot. In others it became quicksand that would trap unwary feet. Poisonous gas started seeping from hidden vents in the walls. This was not just about fighting monsters, it was about surviving in an environment designed to kill. "Wave 1 begins now," Zephyros roared. "Behold the plasma scorpions of the death worlds." 30 metal doors slammed open around the arena's edge. What emerged made the crowd gasp in horror. Plasma scorpions were not natural creatures. They were biomechanical weapons created by the Dominion's worst scientists. Each one was the size of a large wolf, with a body of living metal and a tail that burned hot enough to melt through starship hulls. 25 of them scuttled onto the sand, their mechanical parts clicking and whirring as they spread out to surround Taemin. Their claws could cut through diamond. Their stings could melt steel in seconds. They had been programmed with only one instruction: kill everything that moves. The crowd leaned forward, expecting to see the human die in the first few moments. The betting odds had reached astronomical levels against his survival, but Taemin stood perfectly still in the center of the circle. His eyes were closed, his breathing slow and steady. He was not seeing the scorpions with his eyes. He was feeling them through the vibrations in the sand, hearing them through the rhythm of their movements, understanding them through senses that most beings never developed. When the first scorpion attacked with its molten tail, Taemin was already moving. He flowed to one side like water around a stone, and his hand struck the creature at the exact point where its organic brain connected to its mechanical body. The scorpion's system shut down instantly, and it collapsed into the sand with a crash of metal. But 24 more were already moving. They came at him from all directions, a coordination of death that should have been impossible to escape. Instead, Taemin danced between them like smoke in the wind. Each movement led naturally into the next. Each strike was perfectly placed to disrupt the bioelectric connections that kept the creatures functioning. Within 3 minutes, all 25 plasma scorpions lay motionless around him. The crowd fell completely silent for several heartbeats before erupting in shocked cheers. But Colthax was already releasing Wave 2. Void Stalkers, Zephyros announced, and now his voice carried a note of uncertainty. The shadow hunters of deep space. These creatures were living nightmares. Their black skin absorbed all light, making them nearly invisible even in bright illumination. They had no eyes because they did not need them. Their hearing was so perfect they could track a mouse from 10 miles away. They hunted by sound alone, and most prey never even knew they were there until the killing blow fell. 12. Void Stalkers materialized from the shadows around the arena. They moved like liquid darkness, their heads turning back and forth as they searched for the sound of Taemin's heartbeat and breathing. But the human had learned techniques in the monastery that made him almost silent. His breathing became so controlled that it made barely any sound at all. His heartbeat slowed until it was almost undetectable. Even his movements across the sand were silent as falling snow. The Void Stalkers prowled in confusion, their perfect hearing finding nothing to track. They began to make frustrated clicking sounds as they searched for prey that seemed to have vanished. In their growing anger, they started attacking each other, mistaking the sounds their fellow hunters made for the enemy they could not find. Soon they had defeated themselves, leaving Taemin untouched and still perfectly silent in the center of the arena. Wave 3 brought something even more dangerous: cybernetic enforcers. These were not living creatures but pure machines built for one purpose: analyzing any opponent and predicting their every move before they made it. Their computer brains contained the fighting knowledge of every warrior species in the galaxy. They could not be surprised, could not be fooled, could not be defeated by any known fighting technique. 15 of them marched onto the sand in perfect formation. Each one was 8 feet tall and armored in metal that could resist laser fire. Their red eyes began scanning Taemin immediately, analyzing his stance, his breathing, his muscle tension, building a complete prediction model of how he would fight. But Master Li had taught Taemin something that no computer could ever understand: the art of Wu Wei, or acting without intention. When the mind became completely empty of plans and thoughts, there was nothing for the prediction programs to analyze. Taemin closed his eyes and let his consciousness sink into the deepest stillness he had ever achieved. His mind became like a clear mountain lake with no ripples on its surface. When he moved, it was not with any plan or technique. It was pure instinct, flowing like water that has no fixed shape. The enforcers' computers crashed trying to predict the movements of someone who had no intention at all. Their weapons fired at empty air while Taemin flowed between them like a ghost, striking at the weak points in their armor with movements that came from somewhere deeper than thought. One by one, their systems shut down as his precise strikes found the control circuits hidden beneath their metal shells. Waves 4, 5, and 6 brought increasingly deadly opponents. Energy beings that could burn through any material known to science. Shapeshifters that could become any form and mimic any fighting style. Creatures that existed partially outside normal time and space, attacking from past and future simultaneously. Each wave was designed to be impossible for any single fighter to survive, but Taemin adapted to every new challenge like water-taking, the shape of whatever container it found. He discovered weaknesses in opponents that their creators thought had none. He found patterns in chaos and stillness in the heart of violence. By Wave 7, something extraordinary was happening in the crowd. Beings who had come to watch a brutal execution were instead witnessing something they had never seen before. Perfect harmony between a warrior and the flow of existence itself. The human moved with such grace, such complete integration of mind and body, that even the most hardened killers in the audience found themselves moved to tears. Wave 8 released the Crystal Titans, living mountains made of diamond and sapphire, each one 40 feet tall and strong enough to destroy a city block with their bare hands. Their bodies were harder than any known substance, supposedly invulnerable to any form of attack. But Taemin had learned that the greatest strength often carried within it the seeds of its own weakness. The Titan's crystalline structure, while incredibly hard, had specific stress points where different types of crystal met. He climbed the first giant's body like a mountain climber, moving too quickly for its massive hands to catch him, and struck with surgical precision at the exact point where its energy core connected to its physical form. The 30-foot Titan toppled like a falling building, its crystalline body shattering into a million sparkling pieces. The other 4 tried to crush the small human, but he moved between their enormous limbs like a leaf dancing in a hurricane, always finding the one vulnerable spot where their structure could be disrupted. Wave 9 brought the most terrifying sight yet, the hive mind swarm. 50,000 insect creatures, each no bigger than a human hand, but sharing one collective intelligence that made them move like a single organism. They flowed onto the arena floor like a living black ocean, their wings creating a sound like screaming wind. Most fighters would have been overwhelmed and devoured in seconds. The swarm was too numerous to fight, too coordinated to escape from. But Taemin understood something about hive minds that most beings missed. They were only as strong as their central controlling intelligence. He moved through the swarm like a surgeon, ignoring the thousands of smaller creatures that tried to bite and claw him. His enhanced senses, sharpened by years of meditation, could feel the presence of the queen creature that controlled them all. She was hiding in the very center of the mass, protected by layers of her children. When he found her, one precise strike to her nerve center ended the entire threat. 50,000 insects collapsed to the sand like rain as their controlling intelligence shut down. Then came Wave 10. The arena fell silent as death itself. Even the air seemed to stop moving as the final doors opened with a sound like the gates of hell. What emerged from the darkness beyond was the stuff of nightmares for every species in the galaxy. The apex hunters were evolution's cruelest joke. Predators so perfect that they had exterminated all other life on their homeworld, simply by being better killers than anything else that existed. Each one was unique, having evolved to hunt different types of prey across the known universe. 15 of them entered the arena. One looked like a spider the size of a small building, its body made of living shadow that seemed to absorb light itself. Another moved like liquid mercury, its form changing constantly as it adapted to new methods of killing. A third resembled a wolf crossed with a machine, its natural teeth replaced by spinning saw blades and its claws tipped with energy that could cut through any material. Others defied description entirely. One existed partially in another dimension, flickering in and out of reality as it attacked. Another was made of pure electromagnetic energy, able to disrupt any technology or nervous system it touched. A third could manipulate gravity itself, crushing its prey with invisible force. Each apex hunter was individually capable of destroying an entire military battalion. Together they represented the ultimate expression of predatory perfection, death given form and intelligence. The crowd held its breath. In his control tower, even Colthax leaned forward, his red eyes fixed on the arena floor with an intensity that made the air around him crackle with electricity. Taemin looked at the circle of perfect killers surrounding him and felt something unexpected wash over him. Not fear, but a deep sadness. These creatures had been shaped by millions of years of evolution to know only one thing: the hunger to kill. They had never experienced peace, never known anything but the constant need to hunt and destroy. In their own way, they were as much prisoners as anyone in the Dominion's cells. He closed his eyes and sank into the deepest meditation he had ever attempted. His breathing slowed until it almost stopped completely. His heartbeat became so faint that even the most sensitive instruments could barely detect it. His consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of his physical body, touching something vast and eternal that connected all living things. In this state, Timon was no longer just a human fighting for survival. He became part of the universal flow that moved through everything, the same force that guided the stars in their courses and the atoms in their eternal dance. He could feel the pain and confusion of the apex hunters, creatures that had never known anything but the desperate hunger to kill. When he opened his eyes again, they held a light that no being in the arena had ever seen before, the radiance of perfect compassion. The apex hunters attacked as one perfect killing machine, their coordination flawless after millions of years of evolution, but they found themselves striking at empty space. Timon moved between them like a spirit, his body flowing through gaps that seemed too small for anything solid to pass through. But more than just avoiding their attacks, something miraculous began to happen with each movement he made. Every time Timon's hand touched one of the creatures, something changed. In its eyes, the mindless hunger that had driven them for eons was replaced by something new. Awareness, understanding, a glimpse of what existence could be beyond the endless need to kill. One by one, the perfect predators stopped their attacks and simply stood watching the small human who had shown them that there was more to life than hunting. For the first time since their species had evolved, they felt something other than hunger. They felt peace. When the last apex hunter laid down its weapons and sat quietly in the sand, Timon stood alone in the center of the arena. He was breathing normally, his simple clothes barely wrinkled despite having faced the most deadly creatures in the known universe. The silence that followed seemed to stretch across the galaxy itself. It was finally broken when somewhere in the vast crowd, a single being began to clap. The sound was slow and deliberate, almost ceremonial. Then another joined in. Then dozens, then thousands, then millions. But this was not the bloodthirsty cheering the arena usually heard. This was something entirely different. Applause for beauty, for grace, for the demonstration that there was indeed another way to resolve conflict besides endless violence. For the first time in over 1,000 years of operation, the grand arena of Nexus Prime was cheering not for death, but for life itself. The sound rolled across the stadium like a wave, and with it came something the Dominion had spent centuries trying to destroy: hope. High in his control tower, Arena Master Kolthak stared down at the human who had just accomplished something beyond impossible. The lightning that usually danced around his hands had gone out completely. His red eyes, which had glowed with hatred for 500 years, now showed something he had almost forgotten existed. For the first time since he had begun his reign of terror, Kolthax felt doubt creeping into his mind like ice water in his veins. And with that doubt came the beginning of fear. The cheering went on for hours. Beings from 1,000 worlds stood in their seats, clapping and shouting for the small human who had achieved the impossible. But in the depths of the arena, something darker was stirring. Arena Master Kolthax paced in his control room like a caged animal. Around him, holographic displays showed riot warnings from dozens of worlds. The human's victory was inspiring rebellions across the galaxy. Enslaved species were remembering what it felt like to hope. "This ends now," Kolthax snarled. His red eyes blazed brighter than ever, and lightning danced between his fingers with deadly intensity. "Activate all arena defenses. If the crowd wants a show, I will give them one they will never forget." Down on the arena floor, Timon knelt beside the fallen apex hunters, checking each one to make sure they were alive. The ancient masters had taught him that true victory came not from destroying your enemies, but from showing them a better path. Even these perfect killers deserved compassion. Suddenly, the sand beneath his feet began to tremble. The crowds, cheering, turned to confused murmurs as hidden panels slid open around the arena walls. Energy cannons emerged, their barrels glowing with deadly power. Poison gas started seeping from vents in the floor. The gravity in the center of the arena began to shift and twist, trying to crush anything caught in its grip. Attention, meat, Colthax's voice boomed across the arena through hidden speakers. The human has broken the rules by surviving what was meant to kill him. Defensive systems are now active. Please remain in your seats while we correct this error. The crowd erupted in anger. They had paid to see fair combat, not an execution, by machine. But the arena guards moved to block all exits, their weapons charged and ready. Anyone who tried to leave would be shot down. Tai-Min stood calmly in the center of the chaos as energy beams lanced toward him from all directions. But the years of training with Master Li had prepared him for this moment in ways he was only beginning to understand. The old monk had taught him that qi was the life force that flowed through all things. With proper focus, a master could direct this energy, strengthen his body beyond normal limits, and even affect the physical world around him. Tai-Min had thought these were just stories until now. As the first energy beam reached him, Tai-Min's hands moved in patterns learned during countless hours of meditation. The beam struck his palms and somehow curved away, redirected back toward the cannon that had fired it. The weapon exploded in a shower of sparks. More beams followed, but Tai-Min moved like water-given form, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to catch deadly energy in his bare hands and send it back where it came from. One by one, the arena's weapons destroyed themselves. The poison gas swirled around him, but his breathing techniques allowed him to filter the deadly chemicals through his enhanced metabolism. The shifting gravity tried to crush him, but his perfect balance let him move as if the chaotic forces were just another opponent to flow around. High above, the crowd watched in wonder as the small human danced with forces that should have killed him instantly. What they were seeing went beyond martial arts, beyond science, beyond anything in their experience. They were witnessing the power of a spirit that refused to be broken. But Colthax was far from finished. If machines could not kill the human, then he would do it personally. The arena master had not held his position for 500 years by accepting defeat gracefully. The floor of the arena split open and a platform rose up carrying Colthax himself. He was larger than he had appeared in his tower, nearly 12 feet tall and wrapped in armor that crackled with electrical energy. In his hands he carried weapons that had killed the champions of 100 worlds. "You think you have won, little human?" Colthax roared. "You know nothing of real power. I have conquered planets. I have extinguished stars. What can one small creature do against the might of the Dominion?" Tai-Min looked up at the towering figure and felt no hatred, no anger, no fear. Instead, he felt only sadness for a being so consumed by violence that he had forgotten what it meant to truly live. "I can show you another way," Tai-Min said simply. Colthax laughed, a sound like breaking metal. "I will show you death." The arena master struck with weapons that could cut through the hull of a battleship. Lightning poured from his armor with enough power to level a city block. The very air around him burned with destructive energy. But Tai-Min had entered a state of awareness deeper than anything he had achieved before. He moved not as a separate being fighting for survival, but as part of the eternal flow that connected all things. Every attack that came toward him was redirected with perfect timing, turned aside with minimal effort. More importantly, with each exchange, something strange began to happen. Tai-Min's movements were so perfectly balanced, so completely in harmony with the natural order, that they began to affect Colthax himself. The arena master found his rage cooling despite himself. The lightning around his armor flickered and dimmed. "What are you doing to me?" Colthax demanded, but his voice had lost some of its fury. "I am doing nothing," Tai-Min replied, deflecting another attack with gentle precision. "I am simply being what I was meant to be. The universe seeks balance in all things. Your hatred creates an equal force pushing toward peace." As the fight continued, the crowd began to notice something extraordinary. The arena itself was changing. The walls that had been stained with the blood of countless fighters began to gleam like new. The poisoned air grew clean and sweet. Even the red sand beneath their feet was turning white as fresh snow. Colthax felt it too. For the first time in centuries, the constant anger that had driven him was fading away. In its place came something he had not experienced since he was young, a sense of peace that seemed to rise from the depths of his soul. I don't understand, he whispered, his weapons falling from hands that no longer wanted to hold them. How can you face me without hatred? I have killed billions. I have destroyed everything beautiful in my path. Why do you not want revenge? Taemin stepped closer, no longer defending himself because there was no longer anything to defend against. Because revenge would only create more darkness. Master Li taught me that even the most evil being carries a spark of light inside. My job is not to destroy that spark, but to help it grow. The arena master fell to his knees, his armor clattering on the white sand. For the first time in 500 years, tears flowed from his red eyes. They were not tears of pain or anger, but of understanding. The weight of all his cruelty, all his violence, all the lives he had destroyed came crashing down on him at once. But instead of crushing him, the weight seemed to lift something dark from his spirit. The lightning that had always danced around, his body flickered one last time and went out forever. What have I become? Colthax whispered. What have I done? Taemin knelt beside the broken ruler and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You have been lost, but lost things can be found again. Every moment is a chance to choose a different path. Around them, the arena had become something entirely new. The walls now glowed with soft light instead of harsh glare. The seats that had held millions of beings hungry for blood now contained millions of beings thinking about what they had just witnessed. Many were crying. Others sat in stunned silence, their entire understanding of the universe shifted by what they had seen. In the luxury boxes, the wealthy and powerful who had supported the arena system for generations looked at each other with new eyes. Some began removing their expensive jewelry and throwing it down to the arena floor, gifts for the human who had shown them that there was more to existence than domination and wealth. But the transformation was not limited to Nexus Prime. Across the galaxy, on worlds connected by communication networks, the recordings of Taemin's victory were spreading like wildfire. On enslaved planets, beings who had given up hope suddenly remembered what it felt like to dream of freedom. On the prison worlds, guards found themselves unable to strike prisoners who looked at them with the same calm dignity they had seen in the human's eyes. On the factory worlds, overseers discovered that they could not force workers to labor when those workers began practicing the breathing techniques that someone had uploaded to the galactic networks. The rebellion that Master Li had foreseen was beginning, but it was unlike any rebellion in galactic history. There were no armies, no weapons, no battle cries. Instead, there were millions of beings learning to find the peace that made violence unnecessary. Taemin helped Colthax to his feet and looked up at the crowd that filled the arena. His voice was quiet, but somehow it carried to every seat in the vast structure. I came here as a prisoner, he said. I leave as a free being, but more importantly, I leave knowing that freedom is not something that can be taken by force or given by others. True freedom comes from understanding that we are all connected, all part of the same great flow of existence. He turned to address the cameras that were broadcasting his words across the galaxy. To all beings who watch this, know that you have the power to choose peace over violence, understanding over hatred, love over fear. That choice exists in every moment, for every creature, regardless of species or world of origin. The crowd rose as one being, their applause echoing across space itself. But more than applause, there was something else in the sound, the birth cry of a new age. Colthax stood beside Taemin, no longer the arena master, but simply another being, seeking to understand his place in the universe. What happens now? He asked. Now we begin the real work, Taemin replied. Fighting is easy. Building something better takes true strength. As they walked together toward the arena exit, the energy barriers that had trapped so many fighters dissolved forever. The gates that had held prisoners swung open. Guards laid down their weapons and removed their helmets, revealing faces that looked almost surprised to remember they were living beings capable of choice. The galactic dominion would not end overnight. Structures built over 1,000 years do not crumble in a single day. But across its vast empire, something had changed at the deepest level. The fear that had held the system together was evaporating. replaced by a growing understanding that there was another way to live. On distant Earth, the resistance fighters who had hidden in mountains and forests felt the change like a warm wind. They emerged from their hiding places to find that the Dominion forces had simply stopped fighting. Not all at once, not everywhere, but enough to make a difference. In the monastery where Taemin had learned his deepest lessons, Master Li sat in meditation as he had every day for 50 years. He smiled without opening his eyes, feeling across the vast distances of space the ripples of change his student had set in motion. "Well done, my young friend," he whispered to the wind. "You have learned the greatest lesson of all. That one, person living in harmony with the universe can heal wounds that armies cannot touch." The arena on Nexus Prime still stood, but it would never again host battles to the death. Instead, it became a place where beings from across the galaxy came to learn the arts of peace that a small human had demonstrated. Teachers arrived from every world, sharing their own traditions of wisdom and compassion. Taemin himself became something of a legend, though he never sought fame or power. He traveled from world to world, teaching what he could and learning from others. Wherever he went, the simple techniques of breathing, balance, and inner peace spread like seeds on fertile ground. Years later, when historians tried to pinpoint the moment when the age of galactic tyranny ended and the age of cooperation began, they would point to a single day when one Shaolin monk entered an arena designed for death and walked out having planted the seeds of life. But Taemin knew the truth. The change had not come from him alone. It had come from the recognition that in every being, no matter how lost or cruel, there existed the possibility of awakening to something greater than themselves. The arena had contained one truth, that violence could entertain and control. But the human had brought a deeper truth, that peace was not the absence of conflict but the presence of understanding. And in the end, understanding had proven stronger than any weapon the galaxy had ever known. None of the old order had walked out of that arena unchanged, and in their transformation, the universe itself had found a new way forward.